This is Brazil, samba carnivals, football, and cough cough. This is Japan, anime, baseball, and cough cough. These two countries cannot be more different than each other, but yet there are millions of ethnic Japanese people in Brazil, born and bred. So how did these Japanese dudes end up on the other side of the world? Well, the story of Japanese people in Brazil can be traced back to the 19th century. Brazil grew lots of coffee, and used African slaves for free labor. Slavery was banned by the mid-19th century, causing labor shortage in Brazil. Thus, Brazil began attracting Italians to migrate to Brazil to work on the plantation, to solve the labor shortage issue. Why Italians? Well, the Italians were poor, so it's a good source of cheap labor. But more importantly, the Italians are considered as light-skinned people, and Brazil wanted to lighten up its people, via demographic shift and sexy times. Classic eugenics. When the Italians reached Brazil, it was not a land flowing with milk and honey as promised by the Brazilians, but of hard work and no siesta. Italy thus prohibited subsidized emigration to Brazil. Meanwhile in Japan, the end of feudalism in Japan generated poverty in the rural population, and thus many Japanese people emigrated elsewhere in search of better lives. The United States restricted foreign immigration, partly because it reckoned those East Asian dudes could never fit into the American society. Australia implemented the White Australia policy, wanting to keep Australia white. As you can see, the situation in Brazil and Japan was a perfect match made in heavens, and thus Japanese people began migrating to Brazil. So why did Brazil accept the non-white Japanese immigrants? Because when you are desperate for hard-working cheap labor to work on your farms, you will not really care how they look like, as long as they are not too dark-skinned. Besides, Chinese cheap labor coolies were not available at that time because China did not trust Brazil, and also the coolies were busy being exploited and exported by Britain. So why did the Japanese people choose Brazil? Because at that time, South America was similar to the United States, the American dream, and everyone can make it as long as you are hard-working. When the Japanese people reached Brazil, they were exploited like nobody's business. It was very hard for the Japanese immigrants to return home to Japan due to the low wages. Eventually, by the second or third generation, the Japanese community in Brazil managed to move up the chain, bought some farms, and became their own bosses. The Japanese people in Brazil were not truly integrated into the Brazilian community, because of the independent Japanese education system, and thus lack of mingling between both community. During World War II, Brazil and Japan found themselves on opposite sides. Brazil banned Japanese media and Japanese schools, leaving Portuguese language as the sole option for those Japanese people in Brazil. This marked the epitome of forced integration in Brazil, and the Japanese people were slowly integrated into the mainstream Brazilian society. As Japanese people were not white, they did not contribute anything to Brazil's whitening policy, and thus was looked down upon, considered as nothing more than reserved cheap labor. However, things started to change after World War II, when Japan rose up economically. Japan became one of the richest countries in the world, being associated with modernity and progress. At the same period, the Japanese Brazilians achieved economic success as well, improving their overall social status within Brazil. Today, the Japanese people in Brazil contributes to the colorful society and economic progress in Brazil, providing the world with unique East Asian-looking people who speaks Portuguese, besides Macau. Given its high social status today, the Japanese people in Brazil are quite assimilated into the mainstream Brazil society, largely via intermarriage, because everyone wants some of those Japanese waifu. Some Japanese Brazilian people also migrated back to Japan, forming a unique Portuguese-speaking society in Japan, being too Brazilian to be pure Japanese, ironically becoming an unassimilated bubble society in their homeland. The cycle continues. Will the unique Japanese people and culture survive in Brazil? Probably yes for the next few generations, but perhaps not for long in the grand scheme of human history. From history, it is normal for a minority to be gradually assimilated out of existence, for example the Vikings, Greeks across the Mediterranean, Mongolians. Therefore, sooner or later, the Japanese people in Brazil will likely lose their unique identity gradually in terms of appearance, language, and homogeneous culture. Is this acceptable? Brazilian people will love this multicultural mixing stuff. Japanese nationalistic people will probably hate this. The Japanese people in Brazil is the perfect case study of a bubble society, its increasing integration in a multicultural society, and its gradual assimilation into the mainstream culture. The lessons from the story of Japanese people in Brazil is that if you happen to be a poor first-generation immigrant in a foreign country, make sure you work hard and earn your way up, and perhaps you can help elevate the social status of your people in the foreign country within the next few generations. A bonus if your home country also achieves advanced economic and social progress, because the human brains work by word association. Good luck. Thanks for watching.